Welcome into OutKick the show. I'm your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I appreciate all of you hanging out with me. Hope you all had fabulous 4th of Julys. I had an incredible time. I have, by the way, in front of me right now, what looks like an incredibly contentious White House press briefing that is going on with Karine Jean-Pierre and the White House press corps. I'm not sure who would be the best person to be handling the White House press corps now that suddenly the White House press corps is aware that they have been lied to for years. I am quite certain that the person is not Karine Jean-Pierre. We have passed the point of embarrassment here as it pertains to what suddenly the White House press corps will accept. And I can see that it is right now just an absolute cavalcade of punches being landed right now on Karine Jean-Pierre. She doesn't have an easy job, let me be clear about this, and I'm going to dive into a lot of these stories. This is also what happens when you bring in someone based on their race, their sexuality, their gender, and not their actual talents. This is a recipe for disaster, and Karine Jean-Pierre is right now taking shrapnel in all directions. I can't wait to go back and watch this thing myself personally. All right. Been away. Tons of craziness has happened. The continued fallout of the debate on June 27th played out all last week. Just to kind of reset you for what happened, Friday was the interview with the George Stephanopoulos on ABC News. I'll talk a little bit about that. Saturday and Sunday continued shrapnel from the White House. This morning, the Biden White House came out with a letter essentially saying it would be a direct attack on democracy if Joe Biden is not the nominee this fall for the Democrat Party. On top of that, they then went and called into Morning Joe, probably because they knew that the story was going to come from the New York Times. And if you were listening to Clay and Buck, we had Alex Berenson on with us. Alex Berenson on Saturday broke the news that a Parkinson's expert had visited the White House 8 times, basically in the last 8 months. New York Times says those visits happened between 7 and 9 a.m. The White House came out and said there are thousands of people who work at the White House. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was Joe Biden that was involved. For anyone out there that wants to buy that argument, let me just point this out. If you have an early morning doctor coming to your place of employment multiple times, the only way that would make sense is if you also work at that place of employment. So I think it's very hard for the White House to argue that this is not Joe Biden. And let me talk about this revelation in particular. Again, credit to Alex Berenson, who broke it on Saturday morning. But now with the New York Times cover following through and writing about it during our show when the news broke from them on Monday. This is potentially, and I say potentially, even though I think all the evidence adds up to this is what happened, but I'm saying potentially. This is potentially the biggest lie about presidential health since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Going all the way back to before most of us were alive, you would have to go back essentially 80 years nearly for a lie about the president's health to have been this common, to have been this significant, to have been this embraced. The reason why I go back to FDR is everybody to a large extent knew about FDR being in a wheelchair and the polio and everything else, but they helped to protect the president from that becoming news. That is, the press did not write about Roosevelt in a wheelchair. They allowed the idea that he was able to walk, that he was able to stand, all of that to be manufactured and hidden from the American public. Roosevelt elected, for those of you that are history nerds, 1932, 1936, 1940, and 1944. Roosevelt was elected 4 different times before we said a president can only serve for 2 terms. You know who knows that, by the way? A little bit of a shout out. My son who got a 5 on his AP history test results today, even though he didn't take AP history. Love it. That is a proud history nerd moment to have a son who doesn't even take AP history and is still able to go get a 5 on the AP history exam. He just took regular history, said, I'm ready to take the exam, shows up, gets a 5 on it. Credit to him. Also like his dad, who also got a 5 on the AP history exam back in the day. Reason why I bring this up. I believe that we are seeing a potentially criminal cover-up of Joe Biden's health. And the idea that you could be having all of these different issues emerging as are clearly occurring, and that no one could know about the health-related conditions of Joe Biden, I think is a total lie. Now, and potentially not only a total lie, but actually a criminal one. And I think there is a strong argument that all these people out there who have argued, oh, you're going to be on the wrong side of history if you support Donald Trump. Oh, you're going to be on the wrong side of history if you don't support schools shutting down, if you don't support masking, if you don't support 6 feet of social distancing. They've all been wrong on everything. All of these so-called experts, all of the smart people in media, they have failed on an epic level when it pertains to the single most important job that they have, which is whether the president has the mental and physical capacity to actually do the job of president of the United States. Because you and I can argue on a variety of different things. What should the corporate tax rate be? What's the requisite amount that we should borrow? What should interest rates be? What do we think should happen with student loans? How involved should the government be when it comes to securing the southern border? What should we do with Ukraine? How should we handle the war in the Middle East? All of those things are very debatable issues. But what they all rely on at the most basic level is having a commander-in-chief who is able to analyze all of these different arguments and render judgment on many of the most difficult and consequential issues in the world today. I do not believe, and this is no new story from me, but I do not believe that the evidence out there supports that Joe Biden has the mental and physical capacity to be president. And about 75% of you, roughly, agree with me. This is not some outlandish opinion of mine. This is something that 3 out of every 4 of you, Democrat, Republican, Independent, agree with me on. Yet, as recently as a few days before the June 27th debate, NBC News wrote a story saying that I was spreading disinformation by sharing videos, which were public videos of the G7, of Juneteenth, of Joe Biden not being able to look like he's able to do the job. I would say to NBC News now, would you like to retract your criticism of me when I said that I believe Joe Biden doesn't have the mental or physical capability to be president of the United States? I believe that I am correct. I think the debate on June 27th and the subsequent events since and before have provided ample evidence, whether it's D-Day performance, whether it's the G7, whether it's the debate, whether it's Juneteenth. You pick an event, and I believe there is a talking point or a video of body movement that demonstrates Joe Biden can't do the job. And right now, what we're dealing with is what happens when you have an elderly relative who won't give up the keys to his car, who won't agree to move into an assisted living facility, even though there is now ample evidence that he or she is not able to actually live alone and manage themselves as an adult should or would. Most families in America, sadly, have had to be through that, gone through this, where you have an elderly relative where they don't have great cognition, they don't want to give up their independence, they don't want to leave their home, they don't want to leave the ability to drive a car. These are big issues. Unfortunately, our nation is dealing with them right now. And so Biden, based on that letter and the interview that he did with Morning Joe, is saying, I'm not leaving. Large majorities of the nation, as I just said, think Biden shouldn't be the nominee. 75% think he doesn't have the physical and mental capacity to be president now, much less in the future. Around half of all Democrats don't think that Joe Biden should be the nominee. But what mechanism is there to force him to leave if he won't leave? I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that. And from a purely winning the election perspective, I do not believe that Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump. Now, I still want all of you to go out there and vote, even people who disagree with me and might vote on the other side. I want as many people as possible to go out and make sure their voices are heard. But if you look at the map, right now there are considered to be 7 toss-up states: North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Trump leads in all 7 of those states. Additionally, there are polls out, including from inside of the Biden campaign itself, that show Trump either leading, tied, or basically even with Biden in Maine, in New Hampshire, in Virginia, in Minnesota, New Mexico, states that should not be remotely close. Indeed, I just ticked off 5 states that are not even really officially considered battlegrounds, where Trump is either tied or has the lead. And I just ran through 7 different states that are considered battlegrounds, all of which Trump has the lead in. That's 12 total states. Of those 12 states, Trump only won 1 of them in 2020. This entire race is being, that was North Carolina. This entire race is being fought on Joe Biden's turf. And he is losing ground every single day. And I think the challenge that the Biden team has is nobody's changing their mind about whether Joe Biden can be president or not in his favor. Everybody is actually moving in the direction of he can't do the job. And so Trump is in a unique spot. He's leading. He doesn't even have to get that much attention. He just has to watch as Joe Biden hemorrhages support and burns everything down around him. How aggressive is the Democrat Party going to be when it comes to trying to get the keys, the nomination, the metaphorical keys away from Joe Biden, who can no longer drive the car? Biden's defense is, hey, this is what happens when you rig a primary. Nobody really challenged him. RFK Jr. had to leave because he felt the DNC was rigging the process. Dean Phillips, a Minnesota Democrat congressman, challenged him. Said exactly what I'm telling you right now, which is Joe Biden doesn't have the mental or physical capacity to be president, and Democrat voters overwhelmingly did not pay attention to him. So when Biden comes out and says, I'm the nominee, I won 87% of the votes, I have way more delegates than I need to be the nominee, I'm not giving this up, I'm not sure what the mechanism is to get Democrats to force him out. Donors can say, I'm not going to give money. Individual congresspeople or senators or governors can come out and say, you're going to lose and you're going to drag us down on the ticket when it comes to the Senate, when it comes to Congress, when it comes to governor's races. All of those things can be true, but I'm not sure there's actually a mechanism by which Biden can be forced out of the nomination without him choosing to go. That's where we are right now as we sit here on July 8th. Happy birthday to my lovely wife, Laura, who is celebrating the 19th birthday, I believe it is, of our marriage. Next month, we're going to have been married 20 years. So happy birthday to my wife, Laura. So we sit here on July 8th. I don't know how we are going to change the direction that everything is going. It's a mess. It's a real mess. And I don't know what the answer is going to be. Now, a couple of other things that are out there. Stephen King, probably the wealthiest author in the world, maybe second wealthiest to J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter writer. I can't imagine just the longevity. Stephen King's been publishing books for 50 years, basically. And Rob Reiner, who wrote and directed, I think, A Few Good Men. Correct me on that if I'm wrong, Adam. I think Rob Reiner did A Few Good Men. Rob Reiner and Stephen King have both come out and ordered the code red on Joe Biden's team. They are saying that that this is a complete disaster for the Democrats, and they are demanding that Joe Biden step down. Whether or not that ends up happening or not is a huge mess. Go read the mentions beneath them for what others are saying based on their comments there. I'd encourage you to check it out. Adam on our team just texted me, Karine Jean-Pierre lost control of the room, lots of shouting, and said she's not going to confirm names of specialists, only to confirm that Biden has seen a neurologist as part of his 3 physicals, not to confirm the recent reports. Reports are, by the way, that Joe Biden has not had a neurological exam since February of this year, which is a long time ago, candidly. When you're 80 years old, a lot can happen in 6 months. So this is not like you or me saying, oh, I haven't done a physical in a year. Yeah, I'm 45 years old. God willing, I don't need to see a doctor very often. Frankly, I don't remember the last time that I had to have a doctor's appointment, knocking on wood now. I don't remember the last time that I had to have a scheduled doctor's appointment. I feel pretty good. But if I were 80, I bet I would have gone and seen a bunch of doctors. Couple of things here. In addition to trying to put out the fire, Joe Biden did an interview with a couple of local radio stations that were owned by black owners. One of those radio show hosts has been fired. It appears that the Biden team gave questions to those radio show hosts, and the radio show host used those questions to ask Joe Biden. The questions that they did. One of those guys has now been fired, and the owner of the station said this is unacceptable. I tweeted this at the time. I have turned down a lot of interviews over 20 years in radio, nearly 20 years in radio now, because I have been told, hey, this person won't answer this question. You can't ask about X or Y. I have always said we don't do preconditioned interviews. I'm not going to say that all my questions are perfect in every interview that I've ever done. A lot of you have listened to my interviews over the years, and you might have been saying, oh, Clay, why didn't you ask this question? You had a perfect opportunity, and you may well be right. If you do interviews and you're in the moment of doing a live interview, I can't guarantee for all of you, hey, I'm going to ask the right question at the right moment. I can't promise you that I'm going to be perfect in that respect. I'm not. Nobody is. But there has never been an interview I've done where I have agreed I will not ask you that question. People try. I don't even blame the Biden White House here. If you can get your person interviewed and you can guarantee that he only gets asked the questions that you want asked, I think that's a huge win for you, for your public relations team, for your marketing team. I don't begrudge anybody saying, hey, he or she will do an interview. Here's what we want you to ask. I'll even sometimes say, hey, are there ideas that we should hit on that we might not think of? Many of you who listened to long-form interviews with me before know that I regularly say, sometimes to the guest after a long conversation, hey, what else should I have asked you? What do you wish I had asked you? But we have never in my entire career, going all the way back to 3HL, ever agreed with any interview subject saying, oh, this topic is off the air. We won't ask about that. In fact, sometimes we get told stuff like that, and our producer now on Clay and Buck knows to go back and say, yeah, we don't do preconditions. Like, you can make a request that you don't want to talk about something. Doesn't mean we're not going to ask about it. So we don't do it. Do I think the interviewer should be fired for doing this? My analysis on this is probably that the local interviewer was not aware this is a super no-no and was so flattered and excited to be able to talk to the President of the United States that they were willing to agree to things that they should not have agreed to and were bullied and intimidated by the process of interviewing the President of the United States. I got to tell you, you interview the President of the United States, as I have done multiple times, live on the radio, it's a tough spot because there's a lot of pressure on you. Those of you who listened to OutKick the coverage, we had Trump on twice in 2020, live on the radio with me, and there was no safeguards. We've had Trump on not as president, several times on Clay and Buck. I don't know, I've probably met the president 7 or 8 times now in person, roughly. The first time you have the President of the United States on live on your radio show, it's a big moment, but there's never been any preconceived. I give Trump a lot of credit for this. Trump will sit down for an hour, no surrounding people, except for his personal assistant, Margot, who is with him most places, doesn't say, hey, this is off the board, don't ask this. He's one of the least demanding famous people out there that I've ever interviewed. And I've done a lot of athletes who are trying to set up what they'll talk about and what they won't talk about. President Trump has never said, hey, will you not ask me about X or Y? Legit, never in any of the times that I've talked to him. I think it's pretty impressive. I think that speaks well for him. A couple of other stories that are out there. Let me talk about this. I'm writing a column right now about being willing to admit when you're wrong on something. And I was wrong on something 10 or 12 years ago in retrospect, and I've talked about it. I was wrong in that I was willing to report on and cover improper benefit stories early in my media career. That is, when writers would come out and they would say, oh, this guy got paid X amount of dollars. Oh, this guy got a car. Oh, his family got a house. I reported on those and wrote about them. In retrospect, and I've said this before, but I think it's important. In retrospect, I was wrong. I got that one wrong. And about a decade ago or so, I started to speak out against any restrictions on college athletes being able to be compensated. And there were some stories that were finally, I just said, this is wrong. Todd Gurley got suspended for selling his jersey from a bowl game and his cleats. Johnny Manziel got suspended for doing autographs. People tried to come after Jameis Winston, all these things. And I just said, you know what? This is wrong. You should be able to make money off of your signature. You should be able to sell your products. And I started saying it on all my shows. And now that's basically where we are. Players can be paid. But over July 4th, I didn't have a conversation with them. I try to give their people space. But Cam Newton was at the same July 4th celebration that I was at in Alice Beach, down on the Florida Panhandle. And I want to give Cam Newton credit here. He was sitting in a lounge chair surrounded by thousands of people, not asking for preferential treatment at all, just hanging out with his family. I don't know Cam Newton personally, don't have any relationship with him at all. Again, I try not to go up to people and bother them. I'm happy to shake hands, pose for photos with you guys, but I don't know. He's with his family. I don't want to bother him. All of us got the Cam Newton story wrong. And what I mean by that is, in that era, at that point in time, Cam Newton taking cash was a violation of rules, and it was a huge story. In retrospect, Cam Newton did nothing wrong. If Auburn paid Cam Newton $180,000, it was the greatest $180,000 that has ever been paid in the history of college athletics. And oh, by the way, just about everybody was getting paid. Under the table, hidden. Cam took a lot of slings and arrows for something that everybody else was doing. The way that I covered Cam was wrong in retrospect, because a couple of years later, I came to the conclusion, you know what, I got this wrong. The reason why I bring that up, admitting that you were wrong is not, in my opinion, a sign that you are an awful human being. I think if you are every day not challenging yourself to examine why you believe what you believe and whether it is consistent, logical, and principled to believe so, then I think you are in danger of making poor, irrational, illogical decisions. We have created a world where people are terrified of saying that they are wrong. I'll give you an example of several things that I have gotten wrong, not 15 years ago, but recently. I didn't think Caitlin Clark was going to be as popular as she is. I did not think that she would bring the audience that she has to the WNBA. I was wrong. I did not think that back in the day in early COVID, I trusted the numbers that China was putting out initially in March and April of 2020. I was wrong to have done so. I erred. I've talked about this a lot over the years. People say, what do you get wrong? I'm giving you several examples. It looks like I'm going to be wrong about the NBA getting paid a massive amount of money that I don't think economically is justified because their ratings have collapsed, but because the streamers and the television networks are so desperate to try to avoid losing, I was wrong, it appears, about the money that they're going to get. I was wrong about the Red Wave 2022. We got it in New York and we got it in Florida, and that is why Republicans took control of the House. But only one statewide incumbent lost, Sisolak, the governor of Nevada. I believe that there would be far more incumbents to lose their jobs and get fired, and I thought Republicans would take back control of the Senate. I was wrong. There's a lot of things. Look, I did a daily gambling show. I was wrong on a lot of my gambling picks. You don't have to be perfect. Pretending that you are actually hurts your audience. My decision in 2016 to vote for president, in retrospect, I believe I was wrong. I should have voted for Donald Trump. I voted for Gary Johnson instead. I regret that choice that I made. I screw up all the time. You all screw up all the time too. To err is human. We are all imperfect. The reason why I bring this up is, guess what? You don't have to be perfect all the time. You just have to get a couple of things right in your life, and you're going to do pretty well. I'm talking about your professional life, not your personal life, although that to a large extent is true too. Picking the right spouse is far more important than where you go to college or where you buy your first house or where you take your first job. That's a reality. I don't know that a lot of people tell you that. But also, being right on really big issues can help to handle being wrong on a lot of small issues. I just laid out a ton of things that I think I got wrong, that I think I screwed up. And there are a lot of them. Guess what I got right? Founding OutKick. Getting involved in a big way in sports gambling. Think about this, because I think people need to think more about their life as if it is private equity. When you are right on the right things, you don't just hit a grand slam, you score 1,000 runs. So swinging and missing, I lost $50,000 when I didn't have $50,000 to spend on sports gambling. On pants, colored pants that I thought was a gold mine. I lost money investing a couple $100,000 investing in a company that was a Cameo competitor that didn't work. I'm going to lose money on things all the time for the rest of my life. I got parts of a ton of different companies right now. Some of them are going to be home runs, others are not. I hit 1,000 home runs, 10,000 home runs on OutKick and on sports gambling. And those were such massive successes that they covered up all of my screw-ups on a professional level. You don't have to be perfect. You can't succeed, I don't think, unless you learn from your screw-ups and figure out why you got the things wrong that you did. They say that the average person peaks in terms of their overall performance, on average, at 57 years old. Why is that? It's not because your brain is faster or better at recalling everything at 57 years old. You all know this. When you're in your 20s and 30s, your brain flashes faster. But by the time you get to 57, you've had your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and your early 50s to learn, and you can start to think more intelligently. So I think I've got, hopefully, 12 more years of getting better at what I do without necessarily being faster at what I do. The reason why I say that is we have to re-examine the way we talk about screwing up. Venture capital guys get it. You can't really succeed unless you're willing to analyze what you got wrong. Most people want to look out there and say, oh, that wasn't my fault. Somebody else caused me to get that wrong. That's not the way you have to think if you're going to be super successful in life. You have to think, I screwed that up. What could I have done better? The reason why I want to bring this up is because we have in America today, it seems to me, in much of public life, a refusal to acknowledge screwing things up. Why will people still not admit that shutting down schools was a disaster? That claiming Joe Biden didn't have mental and physical health-related issues was not a cheap fake. It was actually the truth, and anybody arguing with you on the other side was actually engaging in misinformation and disinformation. I think because people are so afraid of admitting that they're wrong. And worse than admitting you're wrong is sometimes having to admit that other people are right. I've got a whole column written. I'm going to finish it at some point, I hope tonight, although it's my wife's birthday. I've got to run around. I got a bunch of stuff going on. My thesis is, why have all of these stories been proven to be debunked? It's because the wrong people were right. The wrong people were right. Think about that phrase. I'll come back to you tomorrow because I got to go run around. I got a lot of things to take care of. I want to talk about this whole Bronny James story, and I'm going to do a deep dive on it with all of you. I'm going to talk about House of the Dragons. We're 4 episodes in. What are the thoughts? I'm going to talk with you about a couple of other stories out there in the world of sports. We got a lot going on today because I've been out for a little while, but I wanted all of you to be aware of just that thought. Where were you wrong? Why were you wrong? What did you learn from it? How can it make you better? Don't be of the opinion that you've never gotten anything wrong. Own it. Own your failures and build on them to something better. That, to me, is actually the way I wish our politicians, I wish our media leaders, I wish more people. And by the way, it also works. Nobody is angry at you for admitting you're wrong. I don't mean apologize, right? Generally speaking. I mean, look at arguments and say, boy, you know what? I didn't analyze that data right. I got that wrong. What you will find is that your audience trusts you more, if you're in my business, when you admit when you're wrong. They trust you more. It means that your attacks have no effect at all. People try to hit pieces on me all the time. You know what the top results are every time? Yeah, we know. Yeah, he's talked about that. People come after me all the time. Hey, do you know Clay Travis voted for Obama? Yeah. He's written actually several books about it. He talks about it. Hey, did you know Clay Travis said? Yeah, we know. He's talked about it. I don't hide. I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm going to give you my best take on things. Sometimes I'm going to be wrong. And when I am, I own it. I love all of you. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP, I'm Clay Travis. I will see all of you tomorrow right back here. Same bat time, same bat channel on OutKick the show. Remember, as always, we had a great DBAP moment the other day. Did you see the guy put the firework on top of his head, try to show off? It exploded, killed him. Don't put fireworks on top of your heads. Sometimes be a pussy. I'll see you guys tomorrow.